So hello everyone again. Thank you for joining our webinar today, which is called Conditionals in 1 hour. My name is Margarita and I'm the part of the engine team responsible for curriculum development and trainings in our organization. Today, as I have said before, we will be talking about conditional tenses in English, why we need them, different types of conditional structures, and we will practice them in different exercises and activities. I'm going that we will have a fruitful and really efficient time today, and we will nail conditional structures in English. Before we begin, I suggest that we could learn a little bit about each other. So today we have our participants. So in our chat, can you please write your name, city or country where you are from or where you're based now, like you wish, and how long you have been with Engine. So I could start. My name is Margarita. I'm from Ukraine, and I have been with Engine for more than 7 months. So please share so we can see the geography today, so we can see where our participants. Thank you for sharing, and it's really great to see you today in our webinar. Before we proceed to learning more about these structures, I would like to tell you a little bit about the rules of this webinar. Please put yourselves on mute unless you speak, so that not to create extra noise that you will distract me and other attendees today. If you have any questions, that's absolutely okay. If you have questions when you study something new, please keep it till the end to our Q&A session, or you may ask them in a chat if you, for example, raise your hand. So I will see that you have a question right now, which is important to answer now. So I will be really happy to help you. If you can keep it till the end, please write it down or remember it in your head, and I will with pleasure answer all of these questions today. Okay, so if you don't have any questions here, let's proceed. And I would like to start with our agenda, with our plan for today. So what will be covered in today's webinar? So today we're going to dwell upon the main types of conditional structures. There are zero conditionals, there are second, first and third conditionals, and finally, one of the most complicated parts going about mixed conditionals. I will also tell you what we study from the grammatical point of view is different from what native speakers use in their native language, because sometimes there are some discrepancies and differences. So we will talk about that, how native speakers use these conditional structures and whether they use them at all or no, and why we need them in general. Well, to begin with, on the slide, you can see different sentences. Yeah, and let's try to examine and analyze them. So what do they have in common? What common features all of these structures have? Would you please in a chat write your ideas? So why are these sentences similar? What is one or two things that they have in common? So we have some ideas in our chat. So Maria says that it's if. So she meant that we have if structures here. The condition if, right. So our girls are right. So all of the sentences, they have in their structure the if clause. So when we are talking about conditionals, we mean that we are talking about a complex sentence which consists of two parts, usually with comma. But sometimes there is no comma. I will tell you about it later. But generally, yes. So we have the cause part of the sentence, which is a condition, and it starts with the if phrase or equivalent phrase to if. Instead of if, you can use the phrases when, as soon as, provided that, and etc. And the second part of the sentence It's a result. It doesn't contain if part, and it expresses the outcome of the action described in the if clause, described in the if part. You know that these conditions may vary, so they are different according to what they express, whether they are talking about the present, about the past, about the future, about a real action, or about a hypothetical action or imaginary situations. So some conditional sentences express facts or possibilities. Others describe events which are unlikely or impossible to happen. The main criteria that you need to remember that anyway, you need to have an action and a result. Here you can see the sentences which express different notions, like just the fact. You may use conditionals to give a piece of advice to the person. You may use conditionals to talk about the future, to make reference to the future. You can analyze the past, and you may be talking about a hypothetical situations which are unlikely to happen or have a very low probability. Now we will talk about them in more details because there is a general overview. So, zero conditionals. Let's look at this slide. And sample sentence. If ice cream gets warm, it melts. So you can see that this sentence talks about the general information known to every person on the world. So it means that we use zero conditional sentences for general truth, for general facts, and for general conditions. Usually there are scientific facts or the laws of nature, something like that. How do we form zero conditionals? So after if part, at the beginning of your sentence, you need to use present simple, because we use present simple to talk about habitual actions, you know. And in the second part of the sentence, you also need to use present simple tense to talk about general things and facts. Here you can see several examples. Number one, if people earn more, they spend more. It's the general truth. It's a common practice. So if you have more money, you spend more money. In both parts of the sentence, we use present simple. Another example, if you mix blue and yellow colors, you get green color. Again, it's like the law of nature, which cannot be changed. Another example will be if you heat water to 100 degrees Celsius, it boils. So it means that, again, it's a scientific fact. It's like physical action, which cannot be changed. So zero conditional is considered to be one of the easiest structures and also very widespread, also very popular, because every day we need to talk about some general truth facts. Now, I would like you to make your examples of zero conditional sentences and write them down in our chat. So remember, it should be general truth or scientific fact with if part. Could you please provide your examples in a chat so that we can see them and we can analyze them? Okay, you have a few minutes to think and to write them. So we have the first example, if you are ill, see a doctor. A perfect example. Here, the general fact that every person should follow and should observe these rules. If you're ill, please see the doctor. If it's cold, water turns into ice. Another very helpful example. Again, it's a scientific fact, like the law of nature. So we are waiting for more examples here. Okay. If I drink water, I quench my thirst. A great example with really advanced vocabulary used. Or if it's raining, grounds are wet. Great. If I salt food, the food will be salty. If outdoors there are 0 degrees, the ice melts. Great. If you wash white and red clothes together at high temperatures, they become pink. Great. So we have a lot of cool examples. Now I see that you understand that with zero conditionals, there are no really hard structures, nothing complicated. So just present simple in both parts, or sometimes it can be a modal verb. We'll talk about it now. Okay, now step by step, we are approaching first conditional structures. They are probably one of the, again, easiest and very frequent conditional phrases because we use them to talk about possible predictions and plans in the present and in the future. So the first conditional structures are used to express the future consequence of a realistic possibility now or in the future. So here we have a good example. If it rains, I'll stay at home. So you're talking about absolutely possible action which can happen in your life now or in the future. So you do not dream. You just say, well, if it really rains, I'll stay at home. Let's look at the structure that will help you to understand these conditional type better. So after if clause, after if part, generally is acceptable to use present simple. But instead of present simple, you can use also other possible forms. They are present perfect, if you want to talk about a completed action, and you can use different modal verbs. In the second part of the sentence, it's generally acceptable, maybe in 80% of the sentences, you will use future simple with will. However, other forms are also possible. They can be modal verbs like can, may, must, should, be going to. So just to summarize it, we use first conditionals to talk about real actions. So you do not dream, you do not predict, you just say a fact. If this happens, I will do this and that. And you are making reference to present or future. Here on the slide, we have several examples. If you finish your work properly, I'll be happy. Or if you have finished your tea, so you want to emphasize that the action is completed, we can pay the bill. So in the second part here, you are using the modal verb. Or if it rains today, tomorrow, we're going to get wet. So again, here we talk more not about general truths and facts, but we are talking about our own perception, our own predictions about present or future situations. It's really important to remember that they are very likely to happen. So you understand that it's possible that they happen, and you express your predictions regarding that. Well, you might have a question. When do we put comma? Because when we are talking about Ukrainian language, we have a lot of rules about where to put comma, how to put it, where, and so on. In English, it's a little bit easier. So if your complex sentence starts with an if clause, so if it goes at the beginning, you need to put comma after this clause before the second one. Example, if you finish your work early, comma, we'll go for a walk. But if you start your sentence with a result clause, if you start your sentence with we'll go for a walk, and in the second part of the sentence you have if, you don't need to put comma. So we'll go for a walk if you finish your work early. That's really important to remember because in Ukrainian we would put commas in both cases. In English it's a little bit different. So if you start with if, you put comma. If goes to the second position, you don't put comma. Well, that's all what I wanted to tell you about first conditional structures. Now, I would like that we make a short quiz here in Zoom to check how you understand them. But before that, you could probably have some questions, so feel free to ask me whatever you want about first conditional structures, if there are any questions. Well, I see there are not a lot of questions, like no one is asking. So then I am going to start a quiz now. In Zoom, I'm going to launch a test. There are 5 questions. Please, you need to choose one correct option in 5 questions. And now, step by step, we are approaching another type of conditional sentences. They're second conditional structures. On the slide, you can see a perfect example. If I had $1 million, I'd buy a house. Wow. And on the slide, you can also see the information that there is 0 or 9% probability. So what are second conditionals? We use the second conditionals to express unrealistic hypothetical action in the present or future. So if first conditional, it is a real action, it's very high probability that it would happen. Second conditional, it's imaginary hypothetical situation, which is like maybe it will happen at maximum 5%, but you don't know exactly. So you dream using second conditional. So let's look at the structure. To make a second conditional to talk about unreal actions in the present or in the future, you need to use past simple after if clause. So I remind you, past simple is ed ending or second column of irregular verbs. And in the second part of the sentence, you need to use would or wouldn't plus verb. Instead of would, you can use also the word could and couldn't. And what you need to remember that would can be contracted, like the short form of would, it's I'd. It's very frequently used, so for you not to confuse them. So you dream. You don't know whether it can happen, but you dream about something. Here you can see examples on the slide. If I won the lottery, I would travel around the world. But how do I know what are the chances of me winning the lottery? I don't know. So, or if I lived in a big city, I'd go out more often, but I don't live in a big city. I live in a small one. I just dream of that. So second conditional is commonly used to talk about dreams. Example of mine. If I had a big family, I would spend a lot of time with them. But in fact, I have a small family and I cannot spend a lot of time with them. So that's why I use second conditional, because it's unreal for me. It's just my dream about present or future. A very important thing that we need to remember about second conditional structures is with the verb to be. I'm sure all of you know that to make past simple with the verb to be after I, he, she, it, we need to use the word was. For example, I was at home yesterday, he was at work yesterday, and so on. But with conditionals, the situation is a little bit different. If you want to give a piece of advice to the person using second conditional, you need to use were in all cases, even for I, he, she, it. That sounds a little bit unnatural to us because when we study just tenses in English, we study another way. But here is an exception that you need to remember. So in any case, you need to say, if I were you, I would buy an expensive car. Or if he were my boss, I would look for another job. Or if I were you, I would do sports. It's like a piece of advice. It can be translated in Ukrainian на твоєму місці я б щось там зробив. Well, so if you go through a test in English, if it's a certification, if it's ZNO, you need to use were in second conditional sentence. But there is another moment that we need to take into account. When we speak, for example, our own language, Ukrainian, we don't always follow all of the rules, all of the grammatical rules. The same is about English. Basically, the same as any language on the world. And when you talk to native speakers, you may frequently hear that they do not follow this rule. And they say, if I was rich, if he was my boss, I would look for another job, and so on. So why does this happen? Because not all native English speakers follow grammatical rules acceptable. And you need to remember that in speaking, you may hear that, but that is not really grammatically correct. Of course, people then will understand you. That's not a problem for communication, but for speaking tests, for grammar tests, you need to use were in all cases for all of the structures with second conditional. Okay, back here in our main session room. Great. So I hope that you've had fruitful discussion, that you have been able to practice second conditional structures in a good way, in a good manner. Because now it's time for us to proceed to third conditional structures and to look when and how they're used. So we can look at the example here. If it had started to rain, well, cannot see it, we would have canceled the picnic, or the picnic would have been canceled. So if in first conditional we talk about real actions, like you understand that it's possible that it happens, then we will act like that. In second conditional, you talk about only dreams, you talk about hypothetical situation. In the third conditional, you talk about past. You should clearly understand that your framework is past and that you are talking about something you cannot change. It was in the past, so it's already gone. So to use them properly, you need to understand how to create third conditional structures. So in the if clause, after if, you need to use past perfect. Just a short reminder that to make past perfect, you need to use had or hadn't plus verb in the third column. In the second part of the sentence, you need to use the word would or wouldn't plus the verb have plus verb in the third column. So when do we use third conditional? You use it to talk about things which didn't happen or happened in the past, and you express your regret and criticism. So you cannot change it. You need to remember that. One example. So you had an accident yesterday, but because you didn't drive carefully, so it already happened yesterday, for example. And now you express your regret or criticism. Well, guy, if you had driven more carefully, you wouldn't have had an accident. Yeah, but it happened. You cannot already change it. So again, third conditional, regret, criticism about the past, which cannot be changed anyway. After if, you use past perfect, then you use would, have, plus verb in the third column. So now I suggest that we also need to practice how to use third conditional for you to understand better. Now on the slide, you can see a situation. So Sarah had to be at the airport for her flight at 9 p.m. But her alarm didn't go off and she overslept. So that's the situation in the past. So she wasn't on time at the airport. And now we need to create the situation. What could have happened?